So, welcome. It's our second session in the series on HR research, or the way we should look at our workforce and manage them. In the last session, we had a introduction or introductory view to what HR research is, and you learned that it's not so much about the science and the statisticy report writing side of research. It's more about looking at your workforce, finding out what they're up to, but it's about the measurement and conditioning of the workforce and their behavior. We looked at an assessment model with benchmarking, and we talked about a few of the metrics that we might try to affect a change in. In today's session, we're going to have a look at a real life, realistic situation, what we call a study. It's about absenteeism and what ideas you can use to, first of all, assess and then make change or condition the behavior of those employees to correct the absenteeism. I mean, we can also cost it out if you want and see the impact of the organization. In the next session, we're going to look at more things like what do we do with the results once we get positive results? How do we view it from a more scientific point of view? And also, where do you come up with all these ideas of what to do to your employees to make them change for the better, to optimize or fine tune? Okay, so continuing on with the work that we did last week, an introduction to HR research and the framework that I started you off with, I thought it would be a good idea right now to do a full-on study. And again, if you don't like the word study, just say something in HR that we had to tackle. Okay, I call it a study because we're studying it, we're making a change. The problem statement I gave you last session was absenteeism. And we're going to use absenteeism because it is a very big issue in North America, maybe globally. It costs a lot of money because people are absent. And we did talk earlier about reasons people might be absent, legitimate, illegitimate reasons. And it's not necessarily full days. It could be an hour, 2 hours. It could be half days, full days. It could be sick days. It could be education days, court days, bereavement, funeral days. It could just be somebody didn't show up to work. It costs a lot of money. So the statement was that at a company called Centra Inc., absenteeism is 12% right now. And the way we calculated that, and we'll do this in pivots as well, is we looked at it from the last 12-month point of view. It could be any 12 months. You add up all the days that people were absent and divide by all the days that they should have worked. Now, if we did that, it would look something like this, okay? So let's assume that our company has 1,000 employees and 30,000 days were absent total. So I'm just using big numbers. So all the 1,000 employees together had 30,000 absent days. So again, remember, if you had 2 half days, that would be 1 full day, right? Now, what's the capacity or what we call the workload capacity of these employees? Think about it. If 1,000 employees together can work 250,000 days. How do we get that? One employee is scheduled to work 250 days. Now, that's not an exact number. It's around 250, 260 in North America. So if you look at it, there's about 365 days in a year. We typically don't work on weekends. So it's 2 days rest out of every 7. So you take away the weekends times 52 weeks, and then there's 1 day that's overlapping. So generally, we get a number like 250 or 260 days. And if this was ever a test question somewhere, I tell you the number of days in a year. So if one person is supposed to work 250 days, then 1,000 people together could work 250,000 days. Now, out of those 250,000, we had 30,000 lost. So take a look. 30,000 absent days divided by 250,000 days they could have worked is 12%. Now, if you wanted to do absenteeism rate for one person, you just add up the days that one person was absent and you divide it by 250, right? So we do have a 12% absenteeism rate. Now let's take this and pass it through our assessment model that we started last week. Now, if I were to ask you, and I did, is 12% okay? And most of you would say, no, absenteeism is not good at all. But we don't know the context of Centra Inc., the industry, the geographic location, the people, the type of work they do. So I could say 12% might be functional. It might be good. That's like saying your blood sugar or your sugar or your alcohol level that you're taking is always bad. Any sugar, any alcohol is bad for you. But there's always that tolerable zone up to which you're okay to have it in moderation, and that will be your standard benchmark. So now for Centra Inc. specifically, we're going to assess it to be bad, dysfunctional, not terribly dysfunctional, not like 20%, but it is not good either. And what we want to do is set a target. So the target is going to be 8%. Okay, so that's 8% is our standard and neutral level. And remember, we're looking at this as a problem for the first time because we now have an HRIS. We have ability to look at the data and kind of see the trends and patterns. Now we want to be at 8%. How do I get that 8%? Well, I look at my history. So if I go back 5, 6, 7 years, I notice my organization, my company, Centra Inc. was around 7, 8, 9%. I know it's possible. I look at 8% from an industry point of view. Is the industry able to achieve that in my location? So let's say Southern Ontario. And 8% is doable. Others might be running at 9, 10%. Others may be at 7, 6%. I want to set a target of 8. And I'm going to give it about a year and a half to do it. Okay. Now, how would you know that that's the right amount of time? Well, you wouldn't out of a textbook. This is experience. It's just something used as a judgment call. Quite often, you might even say, hang on, what is a time frame that I need to achieve these results? So sometimes it's political. Your boss says to get it done by a certain time, and that's okay too. But I'm going to say out of experience that to move from 12% to 8%, which is a 30% reduction, 33%, within a year and a half is doable. Now, if I get the results sooner, great. If it takes a little bit longer, perfect. But you know what? I don't have to be exactly at 8. 8 is a target. I want to be around that, certainly not at 12%. Now, I'm going to share the costs with you as well, why we're doing this and the costs of it. But before that, let's look at our doctor friend. Okay? What we're about to do is no different than medical science. HR science is no different than medical science. In that the way we look at a problem is the same way a doctor would. So, for example, if a doctor found out that your blood sugar levels were at 12%, whatever that might mean, okay, then they would then assess to see is it good or bad. It might be good for you based on you, your age, your gender, your body weight, your lifestyle, where you live, your cultural background, your family history. They look at all that contextual evidence and they say, okay, you're good at 12%. But in this case, they're saying, nope, you're not at 12. We need you to be down to 8. Why? Because other doctors have done research to say you should be at around 8. See, we trust those benchmarks, right? Doctors don't make those up. Now, if you got down to 9%, I'm sure the doctor would be happy. If you got down to 6%, I'm sure the doctor would be happy. Now, the doctor also knows how long it would take for any treatment to take effect. And they might say, okay, we're going to give you 6 months to get this done, sometimes a year. Certain therapies might last years. Some things might be cured overnight. But here's the trick. You see, the doctor has to sit there and say, what can I possibly do? Theoretical thinking suggests that I could do these 10 things to you to cure you. And then the doctor thinks in probabilistic terms. And this is what medical practice is about. They get to know people, they see patterns, they've read a lot of research studies, and they say, okay, I know you particularly. Again, your ethnic background, your family history, your age, etc. And they say, out of all the things that I could do to you to fix you, I think this one thing has the greatest likelihood of working. That is the probabilistic thinking. And they're not suggesting that it is going to work. Sometimes you go to a doctor, 100% the first thing they say is going to work. But if the first thing doesn't work, and we'll call that A down at the bottom, then they'll move on to B. If B doesn't work, they'll go to C. If C doesn't work, they'll go to D. So on and so on. Now, how many courses of treatment would a doctor pick? Well, that depends, right? Let's say it's a rare disease. It's an unknown. They're going to try the first thing that is the less disruptive. I'm not sure about cost, maybe less cost prohibitive, but the one with the greatest likelihood of working. And they might go through several scenarios. But here's a key thing to consider. At some point at the end, if they cannot find the cure, and that is just the way it's going to be, then the doctor will say that there's nothing we could do. You're going to go into palliative mode, or just, this is it, we'll figure out a way for you to just live with this ailment. And that happens with arthritis and things like that, right? So in HR, though, we're no different. We have an absenteeism rate of 12%. We need it to go down to 8%. What is it that we're going to do? Theoretically, pick a whole bunch of things. And then realistically or probabilistically, we're going to pick A, B, C, D, and then try them out. Now, we hope that A would be the first thing that works. But you know what? Not everything is a crystal ball. It's not magic. We don't know all the time. And although I got to tell you, most things we do in HR, we get to fix right away. We know exactly what to do. But there are these elaborate things sometimes you work on that might take several different things to try. Okay? Now, the cost, I'm just going to go down to a chart, and I just want to show you the cost. In this particular company, for every percentage, see, these are percents on the left, for every percentage we can decrease absenteeism. Okay? Remember, this is 1,000 people together. Okay? For every percent we can decrease absenteeism, it will be about a $1.2 million improvement in productivity per month. So it's quite significant savings that we could have. And you're probably saying, but all these years you didn't do anything about it? Well, guess what? We didn't. Just like people, they don't take care of their health until it's too late sometimes, right? Organizations are the same way. Now, by the way, look at this chart. This is my historical data. You see, we were around 7-8%, and about a year ago or 2 years ago, it started creeping up. So if I took this chart backwards, we would see that we're capable of being around 8%. So take time to look at this chart. These are my quarters. I'm measuring by quarters, quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going by month. So whatever I'm going to try will start here in month 1. You see? Month 1 down here. Now let's go back here, and I'm going to ask you, what can we possibly do to get our absenteeism from 12% to 8% within, let's say, a year and a half, which goes by pretty fast. So first thing you're going to say, so in a committee, you'd say, you know what? Money, incentive. Let's give everybody an incentive not to be absent. And not pay increases. I mean, if you find that your pay is really, really lower, a lot lower than the industry's paying, then yeah, pay increases will reduce absenteeism. But you can't take pay increases back. But an incentive might be good. Something like, I'll give you $3,000 in a fake account, fake money, and for every day, 3 days, I'll give you absent for free. For each day you use, we deduct $1,000 on top of the 3. So if you're absent for 4 days, we take away $1,000, right? Now, if you take care of yourself, you eat right, you exercise, listen to your doctor, then maybe you won't use up those $3,000. So maybe we do an incentive like that. Now, in the same committee that I'm referring to, there was a guy who said, you know what, why don't we just fire people? All the people that are having high absenteeism, not 12%, but 18, 20%, fire them. Of course, that's a great way to adjust the graph, but we can't afford to lose people at this point. Somebody else on the team says, you know what, why don't we just give them training? Maybe the reason that they are being absent is because they're not comfortable with their job, and training might help. Maybe. Not in this case, right? Somebody else says, why don't we offer flex time? Because they found out that if the factory was in the middle of the city, let's say in Woodbridge or Vaughan, right, north middle of the city, and we found out through mapping everybody's address, that a majority of our people live either in Brampton or in Pickering, which is either east of the city or west of the city. And they said, oh, look at the traffic. It's traffic. So this person said, why don't we introduce flex time? And flex time would be, we will allow you to start, instead of 9 to 5, we'll allow you to start, let's say, 7, 8, or 9, or 10, and leave by 3, 4, 5, or 6. And that's fine. It might work. We'll give it a try. There's somebody else on this committee who actually said, hey, cool, why don't you give me $200,000 a year, good investment. I will rent luxury bus coaches. We will park them in the mall parking lots in Brampton and Pickering so that everybody can get on the bus and we'll get to work. And that was shot down. The investment would have been okay, the money-wise, but it was shot down because, the bus is also going to be stuck in the same traffic. It's just that they'll all be late at the same time, right? Somebody else said, why don't we have subsidized lunches, subsidized food in the cafeteria? And maybe that was the root cause. Maybe that was the reason people were being absent. So what I'm trying to suggest is you can't just come up with ideas. You actually have to get to the root cause of why people are doing something, right? Somebody else mentioned daycare. So they did go through HRIS and they found out that a majority of people causing absenteeism, right? So you look at only people with high amounts of absenteeism were people who had dependent children under the age of 12. And listen, if you're a parent, you prioritize your child before anything else anyways. So they said, okay, why don't we just subsidize a daycare right next door to our company, or maybe even build one for really cheap, like $5 a day or something, so that the parents' children come with them to near work and they can have lunch with them and they're not going to be absent as much or late, right? That might or might not work. So several of these ideas, including changing working conditions, changing the lighting, industrial aromatherapy, neutralizing the smell in the factory, lots and lots of ideas were had. Finally, the consultant said, look, there's something you guys are afraid to do. And it was, I'll tell you the story. And they said, why don't we just tell people this is not acceptable? I'm sorry, put your foot down. Say it, mean it, and then actually do it. Say it, mean it, do it. Because what happened in this company about 12 years ago or so, the company got sold. And before that, the old managers did put their foot down. They did employ a kind of like a disciplinary type of situation where they said, guys, you cannot get away with this. Now, a majority of these employees are highly skilled, right, technical employees who know what they're doing. They're good at their job. But as soon as management put their foot down, you got to remember, after decades of establishing a culture of you just get away with things and nobody's ever punished us or nobody's ever talked to us, all of a sudden you put your foot down, the employees say, what the heck? And they started doing things like, damaging the machines, pressing the wrong buttons, a little tool gets stuck inside the machine, and they started talking union. So management at that point got so scared that they just backed off and they said, okay, whatever, we're still making money. And then the new managers, in fact, they tried something. And I'll tell you that later, okay? So these are the things we chose. And next session, we're actually going to go through a list of these things that you can choose. For example, a doctor has thousands of different treatments they can use, right? They're all written down. They have to be, the ethics of it. But in HR, we don't have a magic book that says, in this case, do this. You just have to be knowledgeable. But next week, I'm going to get you started on a list, okay? But these are the 4 things we're going to try today. Now let's have a look at our chart again. Let's go here. Okay, take a look. This is baseline. This is the point at which we start. This is all history. The blue stuff is all historical data. It already happened. We're going to start right here at this point, month 1. And we have to be a judge of how long we will give each thing, because that's the target that we want to actually achieve, 8% right there, see? So the first thing we're going to try is A, and A was an incentive. How long would you give it? We're going to give it 6 months, half a year, and it coincides with December. And right down to the time of year we're doing this, we're very careful about. We're going to talk about that next session. So 6 months works out well for an incentive because the Christmas party is 6 months later in December, the holiday party. And we're going to hand out checks and do a celebration and so on. And then we're actually going to start rolling it out. So as soon as the incentive was announced, and it was done carefully, right? People were given memos. They were given examples of how they can earn the money. There were posters put up all over the factory and the office. And at first, people reacted to the money rather quickly. In fact, the chart would have dipped even faster. And we went below 8%. It was quite good, excitement. And the results lasted for about a month and a half, almost 2 months. And if you called it quits right there and say, hey, cool, we got our results, let's move on with life, then you're not a good HR scientist, right? Because you have to wait. Money speaks. If I held up a $100 bill in front of you, you'd get instantly excited. It might not last long, but people do get excited, they do react. But then they slowly, gradually go back to the way that they used to behave because you did not get to the root cause of why people are being absent, right? So money didn't work. And out of the, $800,000 budget that was earmarked, Maybe they only spent a little bit. Now your decision is, do we do the bonus again next year, the incentive, or not? Right? It's a bonus. You don't have to do it. So give it a catchy name like 2020 bonus for this year only. Now I'm going to pause there for a second. And I'm going to ask you, right? Some of you are thinking this. It goes, wait a minute. If you are deciding on these things that you're going to do to your employees, and it's all hypothetical at this point, we don't have a crystal ball, based on what you think, why not just ask the employees what the root cause is, why they're being absent? Well, you might think that it's possible. In experience, I'm going to tell you that's not necessarily possible, because to get to the root cause and to get the hard truth out of individuals, employees, is not as easy as you think, especially in the case of absenteeism. Because if the root cause was something like, the person's car kept breaking down, employee might tell you once, but they'll be too embarrassed to keep telling you. If it was children, for example, do you want your employee, do you think your employee is going to tell you the truth? Something like, you know what, my little babies are way more important than your stinking job? No, because then they'll fear they'll get fired or not promoted. Are you going to hear things like, you know what, I just don't know how to do my job that well, so I get frustrated, therefore I tend to be absent more than not? Are you going to hear things like, I hate my boss so much, he's such a tyrant, such a mean person, that I take absent time just so I don't have to be in front of his face? Are you going to hear things like, your company's so cheap, you don't pay me enough to show up all the time? So some of the truths just might not come out. So sometimes you can ask the employees and get conclusive evidence, but in most cases you will not. It's like a doctor asking you, so what is wrong with you? Now I got to tell you, doctor asks me what's wrong with me, I think I'm a doctor. Like a lot of humans think they're doctors anyways. They'll say, oh, it's this, and that could influence a doctor. So a doctor usually doesn't ask you what's wrong with you. They'll ask you, what are you feeling? What are the symptoms? Then they can diagnose. Okay? Now let's go back to our chart. So obviously A didn't work. So we're going to go to B, which is flex time. Now B, we're going to start here. And what flex time did, and by the way, so you have to realize, does flex time act right away? Does it take time for people to get used to it? Should we give them a little extra time? Yeah, of course. And it usually takes 2-3 months for it to sink in. It's a new system, new way of living, new way of traveling, and so on, and starting work, ending work. What happened with flex time, people got confused. So absenteeism actually went up. They thought, oh, it's a chance for me not to show up to work until later and leave at the same time. But when people did realize, not enough people took advantage of it. So absenteeism went back to the way it was. Just let the people who are doing it, if it works, keep it. Else get rid of it, right? Then we start subsidized daycare, which is C. And that'll start the month after. Now, daycare, I think, is a pretty easy concept to grasp. If within 2 months, people don't understand what it is and how to take advantage of it, it's just not going to work. So again, referring to a doctor, some medicines you take, right? You look at the efficacy of it and the titration rates and absorption rates and so on. Pharmacists do this. They know that within 2 days, if I don't get results, it's not going to work. Other drugs, like, you take those antibiotics, you have to keep taking for so many weeks. Well, it's a different thing. You have to wait. But in this case, daycare, C, right there, pretty quick. Some parents did take advantage of it, some didn't, and it didn't really affect absenteeism at all. So again, the decision is, do you let some people keep it, the ones who took advantage of it? Yeah, if it doesn't cost you much, why not? In fact, I'll give you an example of a company in Guelph, Ontario, smaller town west of here. And it was a company that was rich. So they actually found out that 60+% of people had young children. And just out of the goodness of their own heart, they built this really fancy daycare facility. At that time, it cost like $2 million. This is years ago. And they built it right close, walking distance to any of their factories or offices. And they had balloons and cake and parties for people to come and sign up. It was free, $0. And it was awesome. It was like one early childhood educator for, 5 students or something like that, or 5 kids. Awesome food. Everything was great. But on sign-up day, hardly anybody signed up. Then they started asking people, why? Why didn't you sign up? And they go, look, we're from a certain cultural background. And it was true. Out of the 60+%, a majority of them were from a certain Southeast Asian culture, a country that has particular culture. And they said, look, my parents, my uncles, aunts, my grandparents are at home. They take care of my children. They get hot food. Why would I bring them here? Should have asked me. So in that case, they could have done a survey, but they didn't. They were just so happy to give back. So the good news is it didn't go to waste, because the company, the owner was generous, and he opened it up to the community. So it wasn't a waste. So A didn't work, B didn't work, C didn't work. And by work, I mean that chart, that yellow line there should be going down gradually, right? It's not. It's not happening. So we're now going to try D. And I told you the story about D, that the old management was nervous because when they tried to do zero tolerance or disciplinary action, they started to, the employees started to resist. But now with new owners, so the company after 12 years gets sold again, they said, hang on, we're fresh, we're new. We have this opportunity and we're going to listen to the consultants now. And really nobody wanted to do it. That's why they tried ABC. Then finally they said, okay, this is too costly. And you have to remember with globalization, if you erode productivity, if productivity is down because of absenteeism, the factory could just move to somewhere else where it's okay or it's cheaper. That's a threat, right? So the employees were told in writing that, first of all, they were communicated to, they were educated on the true cost of absenteeism and the reasons for absenteeism. And they were asked nicely by management in writing that, you know what, this is just not sustainable. We can't do this. We can't survive as a company. As if that alone would make the difference. Not necessarily. But then they were also told that, look, we're going to give you a chance and a second and a third, but fourth, you're out. And they were determined to make public examples of people. For the first time in decades, management was going to put its foot down, say that this is what we need. It's fair. Say it, mean it, and then actually do it, not back off. Because then what happens is if you back off again, the employees just say, management's weak. They have less respect. Now, that's going to start right there in around month 12, month 13. And I got to tell you, there was no managers on premises when this whole thing started in the first week. It was so tense because they thought the employees would start talking union again or, sabotaging, damaging equipment and so on. It was so tense you could cut the tension with the knife. But determined to do it. And they did it. And at first, employees said, oh yeah, watch us. Remember, it's not one person. This is 1,000 people together, right? So look at absenteeism. It starts creeping up. And a lot of people are getting nervous. They let it ride for a month or two. But then examples are made of. And bang, more examples. Then employees said, oh wait, these people aren't backing off. And with the right communication, and by the way, they brought that incentive back as well. I believe what happened was, it wasn't the money. It was just a newfound sense of respect for management. First time they realized the cost to the company and the company just might close, shut down because of absenteeism, and the millions of dollars that can be saved. So it almost become like a family type situation, ownership by the employees. And what happened was absenteeism did go down below our line and it sustained for a while. And I will conclude that D is the most effective. Why? Because it got us the results, right? It's valid. Valid means we achieved 8% or less. That's validity. But we also achieve reliability, a sustaining power of validity. So if you can prove something once, then you could prove it again and again and again. That's called reliability. It's validity over a period of time. Or what you can say is we achieved the quantity, the number, but also the sustainability. It's sustained. Now, how long should the result sustain for you to be happy? In this case, it was like, half a year at least. In the real case, though, it lasted for years and years, 7 years, until younger people started coming in, attitudes started changing, then they tackle it again. Now, let's go back to our doctor friend. If a doctor gives you a medicine and it helps you for 6 months, is that a good thing? Yeah, of course. If it helps you for a month, is that a good thing? Of course. It's all relative, right? If it helps you for the rest of your life, that will be awesome. But not in all cases, there's a cure. Sometimes it's the short-term results that we're looking for, and you can calculate the millions and millions of dollars of savings. So next session, we are going to look at two things. Interesting. Where do you get this list of things that you can do in HR? Well, I'll get you started, okay? You can also start thinking about stuff like flex time, daycare, and so on. The other thing we're going to look at is, look, although we achieved these results right here, we're happy in HR. And we might be doing 2 or 3 big things like this, trying to change things, and a whole bunch of smaller things we're trying to fix, right? The training could fix, or incentives, or working conditions, or all sorts of different programs or policies can fix. But because we are HR scientists and because we have time available, what I'd like to do next session is try to explain if I have any sort of suspicions about what the results are. Like, did this really happen over here because of what I did, the zero tolerance, or was it something else? How do I explain these peaks? See these ups and downs, these peaks and these valleys, these points up and down. How do I explain those? There's something there. Can I predict a pattern? A cyclical thing. So if I can do that, I can control it going forward. And we'll probably talk about the control group method as well. Just a little extra for HR research world, which I think it'll help you. And if you ingrain as much of this framework into your way of thinking going forward into HR, you'd be surprised at how you view your workforce, their behaviors, what they're up to, and how you measure the effectiveness or validity of the changes that you're committing resources to making. So we'll see you in the next session.